All right, guys, let's jump back into it really quick. A couple other things I want to point out on the Moodle site before we finish all this up. So this is just looking at the assignments for this week. Everything will be due next week. So the very first one is just the late assignment policy we already talked about. This next one down here is an open form where I'm asking you to post a small little snippet about yourself, quick little bio, who you are, blah, blah, blah. A small picture of yourself. Please do me a favor, make the picture recognizable so I can start to learn your name as well, as other people can do the same. And then also I'm asking you to do 2 posts to 2 other things in there. So look at 2 other people who've posted up there and make some comment to sort of start conversation dialogue between each other. So I'm asking you to do that. The next one is a reading assignment. The next one's a reading assignment, reading assignment, reading assignment, reading assignment, reading assignment, video assignment. This next one down here is, of all the reading and watching assignments, is probably one of the most important. It's only about 10 minutes long. It won't have an impact on what you're doing for this week, but it will have an impact on next week. However, you need to start reading some of this stuff. I realize it's a whole lot of information. The feedback that I've gotten from this class, from the evaluations of this class, is that there is an enormous amount of reading, and for the most part, people were happy that they actually got through it. Some of it is somewhat redundant. It's not pages and pages and pages of stuff. It's just, but it's definitely worth doing. And then the final assignment that we haven't talked about right here is this last one that's saying calculate your cost of doing business. This is the very beginning of when we're going to actually start trying to figure out what you should be charging. And so if you look at the way the assignment reads, it says to calculate your cost of doing business using the NPPA calculator. Copy those results and paste them into this. So we are going to look at that calculator right now. So I need everybody to jump into the website, into our Moodle site really quickly, if you would, please. And up at the very top in course materials, there is an enormous amount. There's a company called Photo Shelter that's all about photography business. They're primarily a company that is designed to do advertising work for photographers. So it is a commercial-based organization, but they release, if you click on this complete list of guides, you will see that this thing comes up. And if you scroll down and look through it, you can see a number of the guides that they do. So the photographer's guide to Snapchat, the photographer tips for getting a photo rep. It's a lot of good. This is actually, there's very smartly written in a lot of this stuff. Some of it is a little general. Some of it is a little bit more specific. But it's just a lot of this stuff, the material that the PDFs that I'm giving you are actually these that are coming from this company. So for instance, we mentioned earlier the SEO guide. This is search engine optimization guide. This guide will give you step-by-step instructions and strategies for getting your rankings up higher in search engines. So I just wanted you to know that this thing exists. It's pretty exhaustive, the list, if you look through it. But one of the nice things about this is that it is, for the most part, restricted just to photographies and photography and photographers. So anyway, it's an extraordinary site. So I just want to make sure that you were aware that that was there. The next thing that down here, this is the ASMP. This is a different organization than the APA, yet it's another one that does special events. Again, it's a trade organization for photographers. I think it stands for the American Society of Magazine Photographers. But again, their name changes. It's changed half a dozen times over the years. So don't quote me on what that really means. This is a cost of doing business terms. It's very short. It's a single page long. But if you actually bring it up, hopefully this will load. It talks about, these are things that we are going to actually be trying to use this cost of doing business calculator to come up with. So in terms of defining what your true creative fee is, it gives you a definition of what this stuff is right here. This in itself is not a calculator, but it does give you a series of things that you can use to try to ultimately develop what your creative fee should be. So the first thing we're going to do is your cost of doing business, and cost of doing business is your break-even point. But to work at only making your break-even point means you'll never save any money. You will eventually go out of business. So it's important to know what your break-even point is. It's important to know at what point you cannot charge less. But then once we establish what that floor is, then we need to start adding other things onto it that are indicative of your worth. And this is a reasonably good checklist for that kind of stuff. So again, if you have a specific style, that's worth something. If you are really good at conceptualizing creative solutions, that is worth something else. If you have experience, that's worth something else. All these things, whatever, we will use then to take that bottom line floor and add to it to ultimately come up with what a creative fee should be for you. Make sense? So just so that you know that's what's going on here. The next thing down, and this is the money shot right here. This is the guy that you need to deal with. It's the NPPA cost of doing business calculator. The first time I did this class, this was broken. So hopefully this will not be broken. I'm gonna, is that better? Or yeah, better, okay. What this is it is a calculator that we are going to use to try to determine what it really costs you to live for a year. Does anybody in this room actually have a number in mind? Do you know what it costs you to live for a year?
Yeah.
Do you know exactly?
Yeah, it's like, for just myself,
yes.
Like 15,000.
15,000, I'd say that's probably a low number. But again, we haven't amped up the business part of your game yet, or maybe we have. But we'll think about it. Well, this is how we're going to find out. So I do this exercise with people a lot of times. I don't do it anymore. But basically what you need to do is as you go through this calculator, you need to look at all of the things that, all of these categories, and you need to put in a real number for these. Now, this is designed to actually show you how this whole thing works. If you come over and you actually click on one of these items, it will actually give you a drop-down menu and explain what it is that they're actually asking you to put in here. So when they're saying office and or studio here, what you're asking, what the numbers that they're asking you to put in is things like, is your rent, basically. That's what they're looking for here, okay? They are also looking for yearly figures here. These are not monthly figures. So if you are saying, you say you rent a baby studio and it's costing you $300 a month, right? Well, there's 12 months, that's $3,600, and that's the figure that you would put in here, right? So the numbers that they've got in here are suggested numbers for working professionals. That's not where you guys are at right now, so do not be alarmed by these numbers. But come in here and actually put in a legitimate thing. So for instance, is anybody in here, can anybody in here not tell me what your cell phone bill is every month? You know what it is, right? Do not quote the figure that they give you for the deal, because that's not the true thing. What the number that you need to put in here is all the taxes and all the other shit that you've actually put in here. You've got to come up with real numbers. This is going to take some effort on your part, but the more accurate you can make this, the more accurate the figuring of ultimately what you need to charge and your fee is going to ultimately be. Does that make sense? So as we go down through all of these things, it's pretty straightforward what this is. Some of these things will be completely zeroed out for you guys. Some of them will not. However, I would suggest this. Don't look at this thing that's called equipment, service, and repair and say, I didn't have anything fixed last year, so I'm putting in 0. That would be a mistake. You need to look at your gear and say, well, okay, how often have I broken something? How often do I need to replace something? How often? You need to be as honest with yourself about this as you can be. Do not be cheaping out on this kind of stuff because it'll give you a perverted figure. To be honest with you, the numbers that ultimately come in here vary pretty wildly. I've had numbers as low as 10 or 50. I had somebody who actually put in like $240 for the year. And I was like, fuck, I can't, I spend more on the bus than that, right? So, and then I've had other figures come in. People have come in at $9,500, $100,000 a year. Huh? I've had people come in, do this calculation, and come in with a cost of living at $95,000 a year. I've had people over $100,000 on this. What ends up being the truth, and I don't want to skew you guys, so I'm not going to go any further than saying that. I'm just trying to say be as honest as you can. We'll have this conversation next week, okay? But as you go through this, so for instance, as we're going down here, what does your internet cost every month? What is your Squarespace costing you? You know, figure this out. Again, these are yearly figures that you want to put in here. So whatever you're spending a month, multiply it by 12, and that's the number that you want to put in here. So vehicle expenses, again, if you've got a car, you not not only want to put in whatever your car payment is, what a typical year of repair on your car is, what gasoline is, what insurance is. Again, click on the drop-down menu. It'll help walk you through what all of this is if you have any questions about it. There's one misleading thing in here that I actually want to show you guys, and it's this. Up here at the very top, the very first one says the office and or studio. Most of you guys do not have an office right now or a studio right now, but most of you do have rent. That is the figure that I want you to put in here. What are you spending on rent every single month? Multiply that times 12 and put that figure in here. Because what we're trying to come up with is we're trying to figure out exactly what you really have to make a year not to go into debt. That is our bottom line. That's where we're going here, right? And the reason we're trying to do this is ultimately this. Now, I have done this a gazillion times. I'm going to do work up here because I don't. Those guys are on break for doing something. I was going to steal that board, but some of them really got to shoot. So I'm going to just do, for instance here, let's say that you come up with, again, I'm just picking a figure out of the air, $30,000 a year. That is your cost of doing business, C-O doing business, C-O-D-B. And you say to yourself, let's just say you're not even shooting as a photographer, you're an assistant, okay? You're working as a photo assistant. And you say to yourself, how many days can you really expect to work in a year? And you've been out of Columbia for a little while, you've done a little bit of networking, you're getting out and about a little bit, you're getting around, and you are able to actually grab a couple days a year. I mean, a couple days a week, right? 52 weeks in a year, 2 days a week, whatever. You can expect to grab 100 days a year. That's what you can expect to as an assistant, because you've been working this for a while, right? So what should you charge as an assistant? Well, if the nut that you have to make is $30,000 and you can expect to bill 100 days, then you basically take this 30,000, you divide it by 100. Simple math just knocks 2 zeros off. You have to charge $300 a day. That is your minimum in order to make the $30,000 a year that you need to live by. And there's no getting around it. And it tells you right off what you need to charge. As an assistant, you need to do $300 a day. So you say to yourself, well, okay, that's what I need to do, but there's no way. I haven't been able to charge more than $200 a day. That's the max I've actually been able to do, right? Well, then this works for you in another way as well. It tells you the number of days then that you actually have to work. So if you take this same 30,000, it's the nut that you've got to make for the year, but you can only bill $200 a day. So you've still got the 30,000, and you divide this by 200. Again, sorry. You knock off the 2 zeros, 2 into 300. You need to bill 150 days at $200 a day. That's what you need to work. If you cannot get the money up, you've got to get the days up. If you can't get the days up, you've got to get the money up. But one way or the other, if you do not make $30,000 a year, you will lose money. You will go into debt. You will then get a job at Whole Foods. Does anybody here work at Whole Foods? I actually went through one of these classes, and Whole Foods is the one in Starbucks. So the two that I always pick on. And finally, this girl, she looked like she was going to literally start crying. She was like, what do you have against Whole Foods? And I was like, nothing. I shop there. She goes, I work there. And I was like, yeah, I was just kidding. Anyway, so does this make sense where we're going here? So it's really, really, really very simple. So let's look at this from a photographer point of view and to think about photography. So the way you need to think about photography and the way in shooting is typically, in my experience, for every single day that you bill, there's 2 other days that you don't get to bill for, but that you have to spend time doing. There is usually a prep day and a post day associated with every shooting day. So how many days can you work in the year? So this is basically how it works. If you are working 80 days, if you're shooting 80 days, Again, for every day you shoot, there's a prep day and a post day usually. I mean, that's just, it can be other things. There can be things that are involved. It's just the price of doing business, right? If you're shooting 80 days, that ends up being 240 days of work that you can actually put into this game. Even though you can only bill for 80 days, in 240 days, that's the typical workload of a person typically working 5 days a week. If you multiply 5 times 50 days, 50 weeks out of the year, you take 2 weeks for vacation. But 5 times that 50, all 5 days, Monday through Friday, whatever, if you're actually doing this 250 days, this is 240. We're really close. So this would be considered okay. If you're doing 100 days, that actually equals 3 days, and you're actually doing really good. You're busy, but you're doing really good, right? If you're doing 120 days, shooting, again, these are all shooting, that actually equals 360 days. That is divorce. Because you're working 7 days a week, nonstop, you never take time off. Annie Leibovitz shoots this way. Annie Leibovitz actually shoots 11 months, 7 days a week, and then she takes an entire month off. Ugh. That just sounds miserable to me. I mean, the month off sounds grand, but can you imagine what that 11th month is like on, you know, the 50th Sunday during the, it's a nightmare. I can't imagine it.
Throw her camera at someone.
I actually had somebody throw a camera at me. I gave a photographer a camera that, when I was an assistant, when you shoot film, you always had 2 bodies, and you would load one body, and the photographer would be shooting with one body, you would be loading the other one, and then you'd swap, and you just keep doing that all day long, so that they always had a live camera. And I handed him a camera that had no film in it. And it's when we were shooting 35 millimeter, and you're used to, you do this long enough, you get a very good, you're not counting frames, but you get a very good sense of how it's going. And he got up to like the 45th or 50th frame and was like, there's something not going on here. And he looked at the film counter and it was empty, and he took it and he threw it at me as hard as he could. I caught it. Which was, anyway, but I love this guy. He actually taught me I know about life. Not everything. He taught me a huge amount of what I know about life. He's a really brilliant guy, but he had a temper. Anyway, does this make sense, what we're going through? So, again, you've got your $30,000 a year. That's your nut that you're actually going for right here. And again, you're trying to figure out, you're saying, okay, I can bill 80 days. I can have an okay average year, whatever. How much do I need to charge? And so you take this again, the 30,000, and you divide it by 80. Scratch through that, and then you've got 8 into 3,000, and I can't do this math, actually. I try to do this math really quickly, and I'm not really good at it. So if somebody's got a calculator, spot me at the very least. So 8 into 30 goes 3 times, which is 24, and then I've got 60, and 8 into 60 is 7, which is then 56 is roughly $375, something around there. That's what you've actually got to bill for your shooting things to make your cost of doing business. Now, I am not here to suggest anybody in this room should be charging $375 for a day of photography. $375 would be a good day for a photo assistant. It wouldn't be a great day for a digital tech, but it wouldn't suck as far as that part goes. So you're getting some sense of what's really going on here, right? But what I am trying to get you to understand or to figure out is the minimum that you need to make a year. We're going to build on top of this cost. Make sense? But I need you to establish a floor to actually do that with. Are there questions about this? All right. So that is what that calculator is about. I need you guys to actually run the calculator during this week. You submit that figure to me online if you have any questions about how to do it. Post them in the excuse me, do you know how to form. Don't email me directly, because if you've got a question about it, probably somebody else does as well. We talked about Google Analytics as well right here. We are going to get into this. This is actually finance stuff. We're going to get into this in just a second. But before I want to get into this, I want to actually talk about types of businesses that you could actually get into. These things actually matter as far as that part goes. So there is a business comparison. Let me see. Let me make sure I want to do this in this order, guys. Yeah, you all just got back from break. We're all feeling rested. Okay, so let's hit the heavy shit now. All right, so this is a business comparison chart. There are several different types of businesses that you can actually get into. Again, this is a PDF that's on the site that you can actually take a look at. There's several of these that you want to consider. These become major things in terms of money, but also in terms of liability. And liability is one of the biggest issues that you guys are going to have. The reason I say that is that if you have no protection and somebody is in your studio, a boom falls down, hits somebody in the head, takes their eye out, or worse yet, kills them, you will work for that family for the rest of your life. They'll blame you, and it will be your fault because it was your studio, even though you didn't knock it over. It's just the reality that there is. So it's an inherently dangerous game, photography. You're not an accountant sitting there with a sharp pencil worrying about stabbing somebody. You actually have gear and electricity, and you're going to dangerous places, and you're saying, oh, sure, stand on the edge of the Empire State Building. Look at this killer sunset shot, and then they trip and fall over, and anyway. It's an inherently dangerous game, so protection is something that's really important to you guys, or should be. So we're going to talk about several different kinds of businesses. The first one is the one that most of you have right now and the one that you're in, and that is the sole proprietorship. And what happens in a sole proprietorship is that you basically own the business. Any money that the business makes gets reported on your personal income tax return. It's taxed at your personal income tax rate. You pay the tax and you just go on, and that's the name of the game. And most of you who do any sort of work right now, that's exactly what you're doing right now. Unless you actually are an employee of a company, if you're doing anything on the outside, that's exactly how it happens. Does that sort of make sense? So there's a problem with that. As a sole proprietor, you are responsible. You are liable for everything. So if somebody is hurt while you are actually engaged in your shooting, in your space, or that kind of stuff, you are liable for that stuff. You are responsible for that stuff. They can sue you for that stuff. They will sue you for that stuff. And again, you will work for them forever, and your family will work for them forever because you are. Does that make sense? So that is a sole proprietorship. It is the least attractive of the things that you should be considering. It's the cheapest, because all you have to do at the end of the day is you fill out an income tax return, your personal income tax return that you're going to do anyway. The second possibility would be a general partnership. In a general partnership, the exact same things happen. It's just that it's like you've got two sole proprietorships. You guys are together. You formed a company. However, the money, all the money that comes in, the proceeds, the money that that general partnership makes, it's recorded on your personal income tax return. It's taxed at your personal income tax rate. And you are also still completely liable. If somebody is hurt, you are going to work for somebody for the rest of your life. Not something you want to do. That's the second one. The third possibility, we're getting better here now, is called an LLC. This is Limited Liability Corporation. And the limited liability is the thing that matters to you guys here in a big way. So basically what happens is that as far as the taxing goes, it's the same as a sole proprietorship. All the money that comes in is reported on your personal income tax returns. It's taxed at your personal income tax rate. But the one thing that's different is the liability. Now, we've only talked about physical liability in this class. There's another liability, and that's financial. So what happens in a sole proprietorship and a general partnership is that if you go into debt, you have to pay that debt off. You don't get to erase it. You can declare bankruptcy. You can't do that. It will shatter your credit, and you will never get a credit card or a loan to do any kind of business